Welcome to the Wealth Builder Movement. We are so excited to have you all join us for this full week of virtual events and programming. I'm here with Ivory Rollins from the Louisville Change Lab. The Louisville Change Lab is our title sponsor for the Wealth Movement this year. We are so excited to have Louisville Change Lab supporting the work that we do. In a moment, Ivory's going to tell you all about the Louisville Change Lab and all the great things that they're going to be doing in the community. I just want to cue you in that this week we are going to have topics on real estate. We're going to have topics on entrepreneurship. We're going to be talking about financial wellness. We're even going to be talking about how do you get money from venture capitalists? How do you get money from the bank to fund your business and to fund your ideas and your projects and your innovations? So stay tuned every evening. This is just the first of many, and we do hope that you will continue to watch throughout. Share it, share it, share it, share it, so as many people as possible can get this content, can get this knowledge, can get this wisdom. So Ivory, it was we were just so excited to have Louisville Change Lab, a new organization in Louisville supporting the Wealth Builder Movement. And to me, that says a lot, that you're a new organization and you are already hitting the ground running. So can you tell us about Louisville Change Lab and why you guys decided to support the Wealth Builder Movement?
Absolutely. First of all, we are super excited to support the Wealth Builder Movement for several reasons, but I'll tell you a little bit about the Louisville Change Lab and then you'll understand why this is a seamless match. The Louisville Change Lab is a incubator of incubators. We are trying to use the transformative nature of incubators for entrepreneurs in and around the Louisville community, but we want to provide them and services and leverage the services that we have at the University of Louisville. We want to pull in corporate sponsors, and we also want to leverage the university's research resources. And in order to do that, what we have to do is we have to base ourselves in West Louisville. We have to become a neighbor to our West Louisville residents, and we have to be in service to their vision and work with them as expert collaborators. And so I think it's really going to be great in order to work with them to really support initiatives like Wealth Builder Movement. It's right in line with our vision.
Oh, wonderful. What I love most about the Louisville Change Lab is that they are setting up a hub right in the heart of a community that is in need of resources, that has brain power right in the community with the community members, and then they're giving them all the resources that the university has to offer, as well as helping them build their own businesses right there locally. So thank you so much for the work you're doing with Louisville Change Lab. Thank you so much for supporting this wonderful effort as well, and we hope to do more with you in the future.
We look forward to it.
We'll be right back with our next segment, our first segment actually, of the week.
We are proud to bring together university resources, Tier 1 level research, and residents as expert collaborators from West Louisville neighborhoods. Why West Louisville? The greatest of all time comes from West Louisville.
Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the greatest.
Knowledge, resources, and love abound. It's access that we all need. Louisville Change Lab is your connector. Hello, my name is Ivory Rollins Cross, and it is my pleasure to serve as the director of the Louisville Change Lab.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. I'm here with, as you can see, a fabulous panel. I'm just going to go right into it and start introducing panelists as we move across. So we'll be starting with Angelique Johnson, who's representing herself as well as the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, the 8th District of the Federal Reserve Bank, the Louisville branch. We have Pastor Timothy E. Finley Jr., who's not only representing Life Development Corporation as the CEO and founder, but also Kingdom Fellowship Christian Life Center. And we have Dr. Monica Unseld, data scientist extraordinaire. Until Justice Data Partners is a company that she founded, and she's going to be giving us some great data on Black wealth. Well, actually some discouraging data, but great that we have the results so that we actually know what to do with it. So I'm going to launch right into this. Really, we want to know, what is the state of Black wealth? And Nikki, I know at the Federal Reserve, you all have done phenomenal studies. You do a lot of work in this area. So could you just tell us, what is the state of Black wealth as far as the economy? How's the economy doing now, post-COVID, or we're really still in COVID? And how are we doing overall when you think of Black wealth, and even when you think of the wealth gap?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So Black wealth, the state of Black wealth is as abysmal today as it has been the entire history of our existence in this country. So not great. And I'm sure that Dr. Unseld has incredible data to help augment what I'm about to say. Overall, though, the economy is performing extraordinarily well, given all of the shocks that we were able to absorb and all of the impediments that we all experienced toward our own kind of consistent attainment of income, and but just all of the shocks that we absorbed last year. There were a number of instruments that were put into play to assure some level of sustenance. So that helped tremendously, and we see that bearing out for the larger macroeconomic reality. But still, for Black folks, we still remain impoverished in record numbers. Our wealth inequality, there's a white households are 10% have 10% greater likelihood of building wealth in incremental ways than Black folks do. 10 times the wealth that Black people are able to experience. So it's pretty bad off. Let me just do a quick definition of what wealth is. And so it's really simple. When we look at just the asset attainment, and you subtract from that your liabilities, that's known to be your net worth, and the more net worth you have, the greater wealth that you have. And so when we think about the ability to secure assets and the realities around how you come to own and how you experience owing, all of that is colored, no pun intended, by existing in Black skin. And so that is its own encumbrance to us, always has been, and currently remains to be the case.
Wow. So Pastor Tim, I think that the definition that Nikki gave is so relevant, because oftentimes when we talk about work in the community and we throw around the word wealth, sometimes we're talking about wages, sometimes we're talking about, access to food resources, sometimes we're talking about things that are absolutely necessary, but almost even you see it a little bit in the philanthropic area, and you certainly see it with politicians. Sometimes there can be an overemphasis on those issues and not some of the more systemic issues. So, whereas if we had wealth, we would not need to have food services. If we had wealth, then we could have those resources in our community for us, by us. And so I'm going to ask you, because you're not only pastor of a church, founder of a nonprofit organization, but you also are heavily active in social justice work, politically active as well, running for mayor of Louisville. I don't know if you want to get into that on this panel, but we would certainly love to hear about that journey. But I wanted to know, from your perspective, what do you think can be done to address those wealth asset issues, home ownership, issues of even supporting entrepreneurs? What do you see in the from a social justice lens and a political lens, what's happening? Well,
I think you hit the nail on the head, and just to piggyback on what Ms. Nikki just said, I think when you talk about what you have the ability to pass on, that becomes extremely detrimental, especially in our community, because when you don't have wealth here and now, you have nothing to pass on to your progeny, to your children, and that creates this, again, systemic issue that we're seeing in the Black community. And we see that really fleshed out through gun violence, food injustice, economic injustice, so on and so forth. And this is not something that started today. This is not something that started last year. You know, we really see since the end of slavery, the failed Reconstruction, and Jim Crow laws that persisted until the 1960s, it hampered and really stopped our ability to accumulate wealth, to pass on wealth. And that's something that I think we have to realize, even from a political standpoint, that there are so many things that could be done in this country if there was political willpower for it to happen. But in too many cases, when you talk about this deepening and widening wealth gap, there is a sustained sort of need, and I use that word, you know, really purposely. There's a sustained need to keep that wealth gap where it is, and keep the rich rich and keep the poor poor. And so many times we are the ones that are kept in a position, and I think that has to be fleshed out. And I'm one that I am, and I don't want to get ahead of the question, but I'm unapologetic when it comes to reparations, because I believe that going back to really for hundreds of years, the issue of Black people building the wealth of this country, there is a debt that is owed.
Wow. And I have a follow-on question to that for you, Pastor Tim. When we think of political offices, and there's always the drive to get more diversity, you know, at least on our side, there's a drive. But, you know, wealth is a lot of what makes politics move. I mean, if you don't have funding for campaigns, if you don't have wealthy individuals that, you know, are able to support you, even if they're supporting you with their voice, then you're kind of behind the eight ball. So in that perspective, you know, is it an unfair, I mean, I want to say game, but, you know, is it an unfair race, right? In terms of what Black people are dealing with when they run for office versus what white population, people from the white population are dealing with, just because of the wealth gap.
Well, such a necessary point that you're drawing out. I think what I refer to it as is the disadvantage of the political playbook. And that is for so many, you know, for all of the races around our country and the way that our democratic process is set up, it is dependent on what you can raise. But so many times, those of us in the Black and brown community, we're asking people who are historically marginalized to help fund our races in order to get to the table to deal with that very wealth gap. You know, even here in Louisville, our campaign, we have done a somewhat decent job in fundraising, but as the media has tabbed, the front runner has raised 15, 20 times more than we have, and that was out of the gate because there's access that we don't have. So it is a disadvantage, and it is a challenge to really lean on the individuals that we know, again, who are historically marginalized.
Wow, I know we saw that, of course, with the Trump presidential race. Whether you're for him or against him, there's no denying that he had wealth that really gave him the edge. And he was very verbal about that. That's not a hidden secret, something that he definitely boasted about. And so that's definitely a critical issue. When Pastor Tim mentioned the community and trying to get individuals that are marginalized to support, campaigns so you can help the people that are marginalized. And you've done a lot of data research among the Black community, looking at national numbers and looking at the landscape, even in some issues of deeply affecting community, like home ownership, property tax values. Can you talk a little bit about what was unearthed in the data that you worked on around Black wealth and assessing that?
Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here. And I just want to give a shout out to the Greater Louisville Project, who did compile a lot of this data. But one data point that I think is missing from the conversation, because we know the disparities, and we know that they have existed and they continue. A data point that I think we're missing is that those who have the generational wealth, those who have historically had access to power, are not interested in addressing this issue. They're not interested. And I think our own generational wealth is a tool that we have. It's one of many tools to strip power away from them. They want to assert their dominance over us. They want us to be at their mercy because the data says they're okay with this. They're not interested. So Dr. Andre Perry of Brookings Institute, he found some very interesting data about housing and property values, because in this economy, housing is a means to create generational wealth. Some would say housing should be a human right, but the way it is now, that is a means to create wealth. We saw from slavery to sharecropping to Jim Crow, we have always been intentionally left out of the means to acquire any sort of ownership. But let's say you are able to get a home, which is tricky because the data also shows that something in the underwriting process is happening where Black applicants are more than twice as likely to be tossed out. And because the underwriting process is so secretive, they just contact you and say, we need more documents, or we need you to sign something. We don't know what's happening there, but we do know that there are some disparities kicking off. They're ramping up in that process. But back to Dr. Perry, he found that. So if you have a home in the East End, it's going to sell for more than a home in the West End. However, property value tax, those taxes, it will be assessed for less taxes.
Oh, wow.
So those people in the East End pay less property taxes than people in the West End, even though their homes will sell for more. And I think we just have to be honest that this is intentional. This is not an accident. This was all written into the system.
Wow.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting because we always hear this statement that, well, the schools are better and all this is better because, the property taxes are higher over in the East End. And so I think that's, for those viewers that are not here in Louisville, that's a more predominantly white part of Louisville, Kentucky versus not. But you see that among many cities, this divide. You always see this divide. And so I think Louisville is very representative of the national trends that you see in other cities. I have another question, Dr. Ansel, and this is about, you mentioned that even, in the mortgage application process, we have this disparity. I know that they have kind of started using AI algorithms to process mortgages, and they unearthed that one of the biggest flaws of that was that the data set they were using in those algorithms was itself biased, and so it was even worse, even more racist than human beings could be. So can you talk about the importance of having solid data to back a lot of these AI algorithms that the world is turning to now to automate everything?
And it's not just data, it's just having people in the room who are writing the code to say, are you thinking about me? So when you said AI, I kind of took a breath in because I immediately thought of the automatic syncs. We have people of color have trouble getting those to work because they're not programmed for our skin color. They don't see us. So that tells you that those companies, they thought, oh, we tested it on white people, so we're good to go, take it to market. So anytime I hear AI, I get a little antsy because racism is coded in because we are not in those spaces writing that code. And when they are testing these products, they're not thinking, oh, should we see if this is, if there's some disparities or racism built in here? They're just like, no, we're good to go. Let's deploy it. And then what's very frustrating is that some of these companies have been made aware of this, and they don't see a need to address it.
Wow. Yes. And the importance of having people at the table when they're making these decisions. To me, I can't help but think about you, Nikki Jackson, Nikki Lanier, about you having a seat at the table at the Federal Reserve, and that is a seat that we don't often get. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your journey to that seat, and then what advice you would have for other individuals, to encourage them to also get those seats, especially when we're talking about, systems like the Federal Reserve, so that we can get more voices in those positions.
Well, I appreciate the question. I think, my journey was a non-linear one. This is not my background. I'm not a banker. I'm not an economist. I don't hail from either sector. I'm an HR practitioner who happens to have a law degree that by happenstance and blessing found this moment. But I do think that, a lot of what our lens tells us, our lens, Black people, our lens, our lived experience, and how we think about all of the sum total of those experiences and how they play out in work, irrespective of where we may find ourselves, is a part of our responsibility to bring the Black perspective to any and every engagement that we can. And certainly in my role with the Federal Reserve, and as much as we are responsible for promulgating monetary policy and making observations and even setting forth musings around economic resiliency and economic well-being, it's irresponsible to not talk about that in the context of what it means to live and traverse in this experience through black and brown skin. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to these conversations, is a real understanding that microeconomics has to contemplate macroeconomics has to contemplate what was heretofore regarded as the microeconomic issue around demography. And so economists have kind of historically dismissed the role of race and racism and inequality at the macroeconomic level. That is no more. And not just because folks like me are sitting at a table, but because Breonna Taylor was killed, and George Floyd was killed, and Ahmaud Arbery was killed. And so now we've got a very different awakening around the importance of these concepts and what they have to do with our overall economic well-being. So Pastor Tim talked about reparations, which I fully support, but reparations is as much about what black people deserve, but it's also about what this economy has to have. We have to have it in order for the middle class to continue to grow in the next 20, 40, 50 years. We have to get black folks up in middle class ranks and into wealth.
Wow. And, you mentioned those brutal murders that those that weren't aware that they were happening definitely became aware in 2020. And I know that your church, Pastor Tim King, the Felger Christian Life Center, was very active in that. But I think people are a little more familiar with churches being active in political activism and in social justice work. But what about the wealth movement? I think a lot of times people neglect the fact that the black church has been central to helping to try to build wealth in the black community. And we have churches, in Baltimore, even churches in Indianapolis, that are buying property for members of their church and setting up businesses for members of their church and kind of building their own, asset ecosystem, all tied to the church. So can you talk more about the church's role in building wealth?
Yeah, historically the church has always had not just a hand in, but in a lot of ways has been the engine behind both educating, empowering, and pushing sort of wealth, education, and attainment. I think where we are now, and I think it's an exciting time, we're seeing more and more churches and more conscious Christians begin to understand that that is not, it's not apart from what we believe in our spiritual foundation. It is absolutely a part of what we believe is the role of a Christian here in the church, or here in the world. And I think something that, again, Ms. Lanier just said that I think is absolutely phenomenal, and it's really what drives me, is that we have to bring that black perspective into these rooms. And I want to just make sure that I highlight that point. That's the reason why I do what I do. I've done what I've done, and I connect with people that get that. Once you venture into the political world, you're often told to sort of take this colorblind approach. And I think it's been too long and been too much to our detriment that we've done that. And I'm unapologetic that as I'm doing what I'm doing, as a pastor, as a leader of a thriving church here in the city, I am bringing a black perspective with the black need to that particular role, and it's necessary.
Wow. And so, Dr. Unseld, we've heard Nikki Lanier talk about, more on the federal level and, also even on the micro level here. We've heard Pastor Tim talk about, the religious aspect, the church movement in terms of building black wealth. And kind of the third zone that I always think about is the community zone of building black wealth. And I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of hope, at least in are, as much as we can, collecting and galvanizing amongst ourselves to build wealth. I know you've done a lot of work with the Urban League here in Louisville around this, but even from your data or any of the things points you were able to take out of that, really briefly before we have to close out this session, what do you see happening among the community as they are moving together to build wealth, even relying on themselves, because in a sense have kind of been left to themselves?
One thing I love about the path forward is that we're learning that it's okay to question the dominant narratives and the dominant data that we've been told about ourselves, and we can push back and say, wait, that's not the whole story. You're leaving out slavery, you're leaving out sharecropping, you're just telling us to take financial literacy classes to learn how to budget. And we're learning to push back and say that is not the data. that is accurate and stop putting those plans and those policies and interventions in place that are not accurate. And so I love that the community is like, this is our story. And then most importantly, we have been keeping ourselves alive for centuries. We don't need you to save us. We need you to give us the money and get out of the way.
Yep.
And that's basically it. We got us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Got the check.
Check.
I think that's what the youngsters say, right? Well, on that note, I am so happy that you all were able to join us. Again, we are so wonderful, happy that you all are able to join us, and you'll continue to join us. We will be right back with a wonderful segment on financial planning and asset planning 101. So we've heard about the state of Black wealth. Now let's jump into, listen, as Dr. Ansel said, we all we got, so let's get together and get it together. We'll be back in a moment.
Hello, I'm Timothy Findley Jr. The Louisville Change Lab has taken the incubation model and enhanced it through innovation and outreach to the West Louisville community. We at Life Development Corporation are thankful to be a part of this transcendent initiative with the University of Louisville Change Lab.
We are proud to bring together university resources, Tier 1 level research, and residents as expert collaborators from West Louisville neighborhoods. Why West Louisville? The greatest of all time comes from West Louisville.
Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the greatest.
Knowledge, resources, and love abound. It's access that we all need. Louisville Change Lab is your connector. Hello, my name is Ivory Rollins Cross, and it is my pleasure to serve as the director of the Louisville Change Lab.
The Wealth Builder movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and brown wealth together. By joining our Facebook group and YouTube channel, you will learn from, invest with, and leverage others. Wealth is a group activity. Work, create, and build with others. Join the movement, the Wealth Builder Movement.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. I am excited to be here with our panelists today. We are talking Financial and Asset Managing 101. I am here with none other than Jonathan T. Davis from JT Davis Asset Management, as well as Pi Charasika from JT Davis Asset Management. And we're going to get right into it because we have a lot of ground to cover. We all want to know, what are the basics? How do we get this going with our finances? So, Jonathan, can you please start by explaining to me, how did you all get to, how did you start this firm? I know there's not that many Black-owned firms nationally. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes. First of all, I've been doing this for 29 years, so I've been doing this for a long time. But my first foray into this business, most of our clients that we worked with were people that either already had a high understanding of how the markets worked, or they were second or third generation money. So those firms, no disrespect to them, but they were not hospitable to people that were, new to wealth, new to the idea of building wealth. So we want to create a safe space for the non-traditional investor, someone who maybe the first person in your family that ever had any money. You have a corporate job, you've worked in place for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and you look up and one day you have a little something to, to work with. So we wanted to find a way so that person could, I guess, have a firm that caters to what their needs are.
Wow, that's amazing. And Pi, you are a part of the firm as well.
Absolutely.
And you're a returning guest to the Wealth Builder Movement.
Yes.
You were there in our inaugural year.
Absolutely.
And so you are no stranger to this. So I'm going to kick it right off with probably maybe every financial and asset manager's worst question they don't want to hear from their client. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right, right.
And I think actually I'm doing terrible things with my wealth.
Yeah.
So if I'm a person in that position, you know, where they're kind of concerned, like, I think I might not be building wealth. Maybe I got some residual income. Maybe I have some money and some change to do some things, but I'm not quite sure if I'm building wealth, and I don't know if I'm financially well in terms of I'm exercising good financial wellness.
Absolutely.
So can you talk to us about what are some things that we can do to get on track with financial wellness and just make sure we're on the right path?
Sure. So a lot of times when I reach out for an introductory conversation, one of the first things I'll talk about is financial organization, essentially streamlining all the things that you've got so that you have an understanding or a clearer picture of exactly what those things look like. We'll start a lot of times with the debt side of the equation, like how much debt are you carrying? How expensive is the money that you're using right now? And if we find that that's a little bit less, or we can obviously reduce that, we'll take care of that. But obviously our intentions are to try and build wealth over time. We'll look at things like budgeting, like savings, in terms of what saving strategies are out there and available for you, given your employer, or depending on what your resources might be. So those are usually the places where I like to start. What is your discretionary income and your ability to put money towards a plan so that we can actually help you save to have a particular long-term goal that you're meeting, or whether you have an income goal that you are striving for down the road.
And Jonathan, I have a question for you, and it is, can you describe the difference between financial planning and asset management? If I'm saving money, am I building, is that an asset? Is my savings account an asset? If I'm budgeting money, am I building wealth just by budgeting? Or, are those two separate things? Should I be thinking about both my financial wellness and my wealth wellness?
Yes, you just think about both of those things. And you almost think of them like a rocket ship in the sense of, money that's in a savings account or money that's in a checking account, you need to have that money, but you also need to have some money that is at risk in the market, especially if you're a younger investor or somebody with a longer time horizon. That money is not money that you want to, allocate for short-term goals. You got to have at least a 5-year time horizon that you put that money away to give yourself some chance to take advantage of an upswing in the equities market. But you should also have short-term money in your savings and checkings, and money you're going to set aside for a trip. Money that you don't need to buy a car or do things that are going to happen within a 5-year period. So they're different.
Wonderful. And so I'm going to ask you another question kind of along those veins. So Pi was able to give us a little bit of kind of how do I get my financial situation together? So where do I start this journey of wealth? Let's say I've already got, I've got my savings together. I'm pretty good at budgeting. But I'm looking at, a little bit of cash in my bank account. I'm trying to figure out, where do I put it? What do I do with it? So Jonathan, what is some, just loose guidance on, what are the different areas, maybe the main areas that I could invest in, or I could have my money, as they say, working for me and not have lazy money?
Well, two things. Number one, you want to educate yourself. Go on the internet. Google's free. We've all heard that expression. Go on the internet and try to educate yourself on at least the basics of how finance works, how it works as far as getting involved, with the mutual fund or an ETF or with a stock. Secondarily, you want to also, if you can, in your area, try to connect with someone who is a fiduciary. And with a fiduciary, you have someone who has a much higher standard of care as far as working with an investor, especially a newer investor, as opposed to a product salesperson. And both Pi and I are both fiduciaries. We don't sell anything at all. We just give advice.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So Pi, my question for you is, if I am on this journey, as you all say, I'm kind of putting myself in the show, I'm walking. I got a little financial thing going.
Right.
Okay. Now I know, at least I've done a little education. I know there's a few places I can invest my money, but I'm trying to figure out my risk. tolerance. I'm trying to understand this whole thing of risk.
Right.
Should I be, doing day trading? Should I, go out and decide I'm going to start flipping, real estate? Am I, how do I assess risk? And is it dependent on the stage of life I'm in?
Absolutely. I like to talk about not only time horizon, but your appetite for risk as well. There's some investors that have a greater appetite for that and can accept downside risk where, they have the opportunity to make, 20 or 30% return on their investment, but at the same time, they've got to be willing to accept a downside risk as well, where they may give up 15 to 20% in a given year in lieu or in an opportunity to reach that higher goal. So you have to have a stomach for that if that's what you're looking for. But more important than that is that time horizon that we're talking about. Generally speaking, the market works through market cycles. We go through these 5-year periods of time where we'll go through peaks and valleys within the marketplace. If you've got a longer time horizon, you can withstand some of those peaks and valleys a lot better. Trajectory of the market or the trends of the market always tend to go upward, right? So if you've got 10, 15, 20 years to give, you can deal with the volatility in the marketplace a lot better than you could if you had, say, a 5-year time horizon. So that also begs the question, well, then how do I invest? So asset allocation, diversification of your portfolio is going to be extremely important when you're taking a look at your risk. You always hear the adage, don't have all your eggs in one basket. So we'll look to invest in various asset classes, whether it be large company stocks, small company stocks, international, precious metals, real estate, things of those nations. So you really want to diversify the investments that you've got in order to mute that risk that you're accepting in a portfolio so you can move forward.
Okay, wow. And then as we talk about, this concept of diversification, I know a lot of us, we're working for a corporation or we got a 401k going, and so we're de facto invested in the stock market, but should we just kind of set it and forget it? Is there anything that we should be thinking about with our 401, not only our 401k, but maybe Roth IRAs? And how does that factor into the whole wealth building prospect?
That's a great question, Angelique. And one thing that I think a lot of investors are not aware of is that in 2006, when Congress passed the Pension Protection Act, they actually allowed for most large companies to offer their employees an opportunity to have a third party manage your 401k or your 403b while you still work there. And a lot of people don't realize they can actually have an investor or have an investment advisor, if they're a fiduciary, manage your 401k while you're still in service at the same company you work for.
Wow. And this is just a wild card question because I have a lot of friends, people I know that are saying, hey, I want to make a wealth move. I want to start a new business. I want to, maybe invest in real estate. And they say, I kind of want to tap into my 401k to do it. No, I'm not. Maybe. Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is there a way to do that properly? Is there things that people should be thinking about? And this question is for you, Jonathan, in terms of, as a follow-up question. Is there something we should be thinking about as we make that decision? Yes,
and another, I guess, part of the Pension Protection Act is also that a lot of people are not really aware of too, is that you can do what's called a self-directed IRA. And what that means is if you have a 401k, you can then, there's a lot of paperwork involved in this, set up a separate IRA, transfer part of your money from your 401k to your self-directed IRA, use that self-directed money to buy real estate, to buy a myriad of different things. You can buy gold coins, there are lots of things you can do, and the money that's inside the self-directed IRA, it's still tax qualified. That's the thing most people miss. When you pull money out of a 401k and you spend it, you are penalized and taxed if you're under 59 and a half years old. But if you do it as a transfer using a self-directed IRA, you can then do that in such a way that you're not penalized or taxed. It can still stay in a tax-deferred situation.
And then in terms of that, I'm glad you said that because I've even heard of some situations of people pulling money out of their 401k and not realizing they had a tax obligation for that. And not to get too complicated into that, obviously, if you guys want a session, you can book a session. But, just so people have a loose idea, just a range, when you pull money out of a 401k, what's kind of a general range that you can, from here to here that the tax might be on that money. Just so people know it's not just little thing.
Right. It's going to be a 10% penalty if you're under 59.5 years old. Plus, they're going to withhold 10% for state taxes, and they're going to withhold 10% for federal taxes as well. And at the end of the year, when you file your taxes, you may have other taxes due on top of that, depending upon what your total income was for that year. So it could be bad. It could be 25 to 35% that you lose if you take money out of a 401k without properly setting up a self-directed IRA to put that money into.
Wow. I know a lot of our viewers are going to love that advice, because I think I've seen a lot of people kind of just pulling it out, either taking the penalty or tax, and I've been realizing it was a penalty and tax until Uncle Sam comes back years later after more penalties have added on to it. So in terms, though, Pi, of this wealth journey that we're on, I'm hearing a lot about tech companies kind of getting into what they're calling now fintech. So using technology, when you're either doing financial or wealth planning, or even just, something as simple as banking through my phone.
Sure.
This is maybe a little off topic, but what do you see as kind of the future of fintech? And does that play a role? Are there some apps or some things that you think we might want to think about as we're building wealth that could be handy in the day-to-day maybe? Or
A lot of the money managers that we use have actually started to integrate algorithms into their management process as they look to invest for particular clients. So I have to admit, the idea behind artificial intelligence in terms of looking at historical trends in the marketplace and using that to try and define what the future looks like, or how to give recommendations based on what we've seen before, is becoming more prevalent, certainly. Even myself, once upon a time in my trading days, you could use systems that would allow you to automate sell disciplines and things of that nature, where you could place stop losses on particular stocks if it moved by a certain amount to the downside. So automating your strategy in terms of a discipline is something that has been around, but it's certainly being innovated, here throughout. So, I don't have a particular, tech company that I would suggest, but certainly if you don't have the time to personally look at it yourself, you can't be in front of the computer all day long. There are various services that, as I suggested, are automating your investment strategy, or will allow you to have automatic stop losses put in the event that a stock that you've traded goes downward. So those are things that are certainly becoming more prevalent.
Wow, and I can definitely understand your tone of caution. I mean, if we see what happened with the housing crisis that we had, that was all based off of historical trends predicting what you should get into right now. So, and then we're talking about black wealth, so I can only imagine, just as we talked in the previous segment, that you have some biases that come in those AI algorithms that are kind of baked in, and wondering, historically, black people as a community, because of something called slavery, haven't necessarily been in the historical data of wealth going back. And so I wonder if some of those biases can actually be detrimental.
Absolutely.
But of course, being a PC, electrical engineer, I'm always pro-tech, but I love your wise words of be cautious about that. Right. So I am so glad I had a chance to talk with you both. This has been a great segment. I know, Jonathan, I'll be talking with you later on in the week. Yes. We'll be talking about how to invest funds with friends. And so I'm glad I'll be seeing you again. Pi, thank you so much. And to all of you, please stay tuned. Join us again. We'll be right back in a moment. We'll be talking legacy wealth.
Hello, I'm Timothy Findley Jr. The Louisville Change Lab has taken the incubation model and enhanced it through innovation and outreach to the West Louisville community. We at Life Development Corporation are thankful to be a part of this transcendent initiative with the University of Louisville Change Lab.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. So we have had a wonderful panel on the state of Black wealth. We have been able to hear about financial asset planning 101. And now I want to talk about legacy wealth and what it is, how do you generate it, and how do we make sure that we understand wealth isn't really built in one generation. It takes at least 3 to get it going. So I'm excited to be here with my panelists today. We have none other than Samuel Ellis and Chelsea Ellis Hogan with us today. Father-daughter duo. So these individuals to me just truly represent the legacy wealth concept. And we're not even only talking about legacy wealth in terms of what's passed on, we're talking about legacy wealth in terms of a whole business being passed on. So we're talking about generational entrepreneurship. So I'm gonna kick right off and get right into it because I know, time goes by quickly. And I really wanna start with you, Samuel, and I want you to just kind of walk us through the journey of how you came to enter into the wealth perspective, maybe via entrepreneurship, starting out the company.
Right, yeah, it started a long time ago. And in high school, I went to a class, a business class, and when I was in that class, it just changed everything for me because I realized that I could start my own business and I didn't have to worry about anyone telling me when to come, when to go, how much money I made, none of that. And I didn't think college was for me. So that's where it started at, right in high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were an entrepreneur early on,
Yeah.
right out the gate.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, so tell us about, I'm sure then came the family. I'm sure.
Right.
And so when was the first time that you really thought about wealth in the context of your family and what you wanted to maybe leave to your kids? How young were you when that thought occurred?
Yeah, I thought about it very young. My parents were poor. We lived in the West End, Shawnee area, and I made a decision that I wasn't going to stay poor, and that the only way that I would be able to create wealth for my family was being an entrepreneur and work very hard. And that's where it started at. And I started my first business was a mail order business, and because I didn't know anything about business. So I just did whatever I could, read anything I could read about business. And it started from there. It just kept, knowledge is very powerful. Knowledge changed my life.
Wow. And then how did you end up getting into Jim Reynolds' asphalt contractor business? Tell me about that, the generation of that.
Yeah, the industry is the pavement maintenance industry. So I started a company called True Service, which was a maintenance company for the pavement maintenance industry. And I owned a parking lot sweeping business for 17 years. I sold that company in 2007-8 for $1.3 million. I decided that the rest of my life I wanted to be able to teach people about entrepreneurship, how I was able to create wealth for myself from being a poor black guy in the West End. And so I started doing videos online. My mom reached out to me because my uncle Jim Reynolds got sick. And she told me, hey, can you watch out to my brother's business while he's sick? And then I said, yeah. And then when I went to his business, it was amazing. I saw something. And then I was thinking about my daughter. She's graduated from high school. And I knew that she had that entrepreneur spirit as well because I've been teaching my children from infancy about business. And I had that father-daughter talk with her. I said, what do you want to do with your life? She said, well, Dad, I want to go into business for myself. She said, I don't know what, but I want to go in business for myself. So I gave her an options. I said, you can work with me in my online business, or you can start working with me with your uncle's business. And she took the second, because nobody knows about online marketing. So she took the second option, and that's what really started Jim Reynolds, because of her. That's why I decided to take that business on and grow that business.
Wow. So Chelsea, you got, choose your own adventure.
Right, yep.
But I know that Jim Reynolds is not your first rodeo either, as young as you are, and that you have been a serial entrepreneur from a very young age. So before we get into that Jim Reynolds line, right, which is you, there's a lot to unpack there.
Right,
Can you tell me about the very first business, that you started, kind of this one aspect of generational wealth, this generational knowledge. So how did you flip that generational knowledge? What was your first business?
Definitely. So I would say my very first business, I don't even know if my father knows about it. When Craigslist first started, I got on there and I created an ad for a lawn care service. Because I was like, I want to just start a business. I want to see if somebody's going to reach out to me. And I probably was maybe freshman in high school at that time. So I was really young when I did that. But I was, I just always knew I wanted to be in business because I was always around my parents. So I always got to join them, when they went out and bidded on jobs or when they were doing interviews. I was able to kind of see those processes happen, and it just made me love it because even my father, he was able to have an office at home. So if I needed to go to see my father, all I had to do was go downstairs. Yeah. I didn't have to call him, and see if he's at work or a job that he was at. So it started really, really young.
Wow. So did you envision that you would one day be CEO of Jim Reynolds Asphalt Company? And as a black female, which I do not want to overlook this, although you are killing the game, it is very difficult for women in general in the construction industry, but then on top of it being a black female, but then it's a little bit different when you own your own company.
Right, definitely.
So tell us about that dynamic.
Definitely. So I always was raised around the home improvement and construction industry. So because of that, I was comfortable with it, but I really didn't know a lot about asphalt though. So I always knew that I was going to be in business, but I never knew that it was going to be the Jim Reynolds Asphalt, business that I would take over. But as my dad mentioned, when he started mentoring me after high school, I just started testing out things, seeing if I liked, the asphalt business, see if I like marketing, sales, and different things like that. And ended up just falling in love with the whole business structure that was in place, and just being able to work with him. And then my great uncle at the time, I enjoyed the whole process of learning and having them as my mentors.
Wow, that's amazing. So going back to you, Samuel, in terms of kind of this, you give Chelsea an option, choose your own adventure, and she chose to go the asphalt route, right? Not the online route. But when you think about other investments and things beyond just entrepreneurship, because we know that wealth is generated predominantly for entrepreneurship, stock market investment, or real estate investment, can you talk about, is there more to your wealth journey? Were there other aspects of your story that you wanted to pass on to your kids?
Yes. It was way back in my journey. I was connected with about 4 black guys, and we created a organization called Generous Performance, and it was an investment club. And we wanted to talk about real estate and stocks. And so we bought this program from a guy named Carlton Sheets to teach us how to buy real estate with little or no money. And I really fell in love when I got in that course. I listened to the tapes, and I actually applied what I learned, which those guys didn't. And I bought my first piece of real estate at the age of 23 years old. And that changed everything for me, because the real estate only cost me $11,000, and I went in and worked and got it together, and I sold it for $79,000. And that was the journey. So one of the things that I teach my kids is to take in knowledge, just listen and learn, apply it, and then share with other people. That is the key to success. And that's what Chelsea's been doing. She's been taking in knowledge from me, and then now she has branched out and taken in knowledge for other people. She applies it, and then she shares it. And the same thing I'm still doing today. And so real estate changed my life. And the other thing that I teach my kids is money knowledge, because the education system has failed us when it comes to money and how money works. And they teach us about everything else, reading, writing, math, but they don't teach us about money. And so when I started studying about money in 2013, money attracts to you opportunities. So that's how I learned about cryptocurrency. Because I would have never known anything about cryptocurrency if I wasn't studying the trail of money and how money works.
Wow. So when we think about cryptocurrency, which is a fascinating topic for me, I got to have you back on a whole segment on cryptocurrency. But when I think of generational wealth, and I always think, especially in our community, sometimes we're much more conservative because, we haven't had generations of wealth. But cryptocurrency, that's not necessarily a conservative move, but it's a visionary move.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about, what advice would you give to other individuals that are, hey, maybe I'm starting late to the generational wealth game, or maybe I've been here already, but, I'm trying to figure out, should I get into some areas that are relatively new? And specifically the cryptocurrency, can you describe, kind of how you got into that space and, any thoughts for people around that?
Yeah, because one of the things that one of our philosophies in business is that our business is our foundation. It's where we generate income from. But it doesn't create wealth for us. It's the investments after the investment that creates wealth for us. So we have a philosophy that we take this money and we move it. Money is designed to move. It does not designed to stay in one place. So we take that money and we move it to other places, and that's where the wealth comes in at. And so we teach our children and our children's children the same philosophy, and hopefully they take that knowledge and pass it down. Because I've learned one thing about money is that money can come and it can go. Just like the money that's happening in some of these countries at a war. People have generated a lot of wealth, but it could go in overnight. But nobody can take your knowledge away from you. So if you can generate wealth before, you can do it again and again and again. What happened in 2008 when the financial bubble hit? A lot of people, Caucasians alike, lost a lot of money. But those same people that I know then, they're wealthy again.
Wow.
Because of knowledge.
Wow.
Money knowledge.
Wow. So Chelsea, I have saved the last question for you. I want to know, you have learned from, your father how to generate wealth. You have been doing it for a long time. Are you, you're now Chelsea Ellis Hogan. So my question to you is, are you already thinking, or have you been already thinking before you got married about generational wealth and what you want to leave on to the next generation? And what is that?
Definitely. So I've always thought about generational wealth just because I was so blessed with amazing parents who thought about it. So I realized that it gave me that leverage to be able to have a step ahead in my journey. So if I have that step ahead, why not give it to the other people around me, the people who are coming after me? So with that, I've always had it in my mind. And like my father said, I always use the technique of just teaching people what it is I'm learning and trying to give others the example too of, hey, if I can do it, you definitely can do it too. So I'm always sharing just knowledge, information, and just giving people opportunity. It's even like people at young ages. So my nephew, baby Mike, he's only 3 years old, but he goes out and does estimates. And anytime I'm on the phone, he asks, Chelsea, are you at the garage? Chelsea, are you doing estimates? So he's already catching on at a young age. And those things truly matter because when you get older and when you become in your adulthood, the kids are going to look at that and think, okay, what did my mom do? What did my aunt do to create income? And they'll see we have a business that we can use in order to create that. So
wow, I love that. And I love that your viewpoint extends beyond just kids that you might have, that you're looking at the totality of your family and thinking generation, just like the millennials are a generation. We're not all related, but we're a generation. And so you're really, honing in on that concept that generational wealth is not just about mom to dad, to son, to daughter, and then going on and on. It's about your whole family across the spread and even extend into your community.
Exactly.
So, well, I'm so glad I had the both of you on here. Our time is up, but I know that I have to have you both back, perhaps some solo interviews in the future. And thank you all for joining us for this evening of Wealth Builder Movement. Stay tuned. Keep watching every night. We have so many more topics to cover: real estate, entrepreneurship, how do you get money for your businesses and for these deals, as well as some non-traditional investment opportunities that are coming up. So please tune in again tomorrow night, and we'll see you then.
We are proud to bring together university resources, Tier 1 level research, and residents as expert collaborators from West Louisville neighborhoods. Why West Louisville? The greatest of all time comes from West Louisville.
Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the greatest.
Knowledge, resources, and love abound. It's access that we all need. Louisville Change Lab is your connector.
Hello, my name is Ivory Rollins Cross, and it is my pleasure to serve as the director of the Louisville Change Lab.
The Wealth Builder Movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and brown wealth together. By joining our Facebook group and YouTube channel, you will learn from, invest with, and leverage others. Wealth is a group activity. Work, create, and build with others. Join the movement, the Wealth Builder Movement.